I was jolted awake from a nightmare once again. In my dream, there were my two previous lives, and an unknown voice kept repeating to me, "This is your last chance." I am the eldest legitimate daughter of the first branch of the Kui family in King He. In my first life, I married Valentine Z, whose family had been on friendly terms with the Kui family for generations. She used my dowry, took advantage of the Kui family's influence, and with the political treatises I wrote, we climbed up the social ladder step by step. However, I endured 10 years of torment from my mother-in-law in the Z family. In the end, my own younger sister, Celine Kui, sent me to my grave with a cup of poisoned wine while I lay sick in bed. She leaned down with a malicious smile on her face and said, "Sister, so what if everyone says you're better than me? In the end, I'm the one who won." Only then did I realize that beneath her seemingly gentle and obedient appearance, she had always been jealous of me and couldn't wait to get rid of me. My soul lingered for 7 days, only to witness Valentine's framing the Kui family for treason. He used the lives of 268 members of the Kui family as his final stepping stone. Except Celine Kui. She was spared because of her meritorious reporting and became the wife of Prime Minister Valentine Z. Filled with overwhelming resentment and unwillingness, I was reborn and found myself on the day when I was betrothed to Valentine Z. That was my second life. I knelt in front of my father and said, "Father, I don't want to get married." My father asked in confusion, "The Z family has been on good terms with ours for generations. Valentine Z is outstanding in learning, appearance, and character. Why don't you want to marry him?" I really couldn't come up with a reason for not wanting to marry him, even though I had no feelings for him at all. My father frowned and said, "Could it be that you think the Z family has declined? It's not the behavior of a gentleman to despise the poor and favor the rich and break one's promises." I knocked my head heavily on the ground. "I won't marry him." My father was extremely angry at my unreasonable defiance and administered the family punishment to me. It landed on my waist, and the pain was unbearable. Compared to the 10 years of suffering in the Z family in my previous life and the excruciating pain after my death, it was nothing. My father still insisted that I get married. I had no choice but to threaten him with my life, disregarding all etiquette and upbringing, and he reluctantly agreed to postpone the matter. Before long, an imperial edict came from the palace, decrying that I was to be made an imperial concubine. The previous dynasty was corrupt and incompetent. The late emperor originally ran an escort agency, but was forced to become an outlaw. No one could have imagined that he would actually seize the throne in 10 years. However, the noble families refused to serve the new dynasty. Not long ago, the crown prince had just ascended the throne, and there was only one empress in the palace. Presumably, he wanted to establish friendly relations with the noble families through marriage alliances. But perhaps they didn't know that according to the Kui families, we don't marry merchants and we don't become concubines. Unfortunately, in my father's eyes, this new emperor met both criteria, so he felt deeply humiliated and wanted me to commit suicide to preserve the Kui family's reputation. I had finally gotten a chance to live again, and naturally, I didn't want to die like this. I knelt on the ground and grabbed the hem of my father's robe. "Father, do you really want to force your daughter to death?" He pretended to sigh helplessly, and then his anger fluttered up again. "If you had married Valentine Z earlier, none of this would have happened. But what was the difference between living like that and being dead?" Perhaps my previous defiance had completely enraged him, and he no longer cared about our father-daughter relationship at all. He coldly called the butler. "Hugh and Gwen, since the eldest miss won't do it herself, you can send her on her way for me." I stood there in a daze, and a chill crept up from the soles of my feet. My mother let out a scream. "Are you crazy?" Nathaniel Kui also tried to persuade him. "Father, you can't do this." Ethan Kui even clung tightly to his father's leg and pleaded. I instinctively looked at Celine Kui, but she slightly raised the corners of her mouth. However, she still knelt down and said, "Father, is elder sister more important than the Kui family's century-old reputation?" In the end, I still died. The moment the white silk tightened around my neck, the moment I couldn't breathe, it felt as if something in my chest was about to burst. That was my boundless resentment and unwillingness. In this life, I didn't get to see the end of the Kui family, but I don't think it will be a good one, because scholars all over the country praised my integrity. They said that the royal family had forced the most outstanding girl of the Kui family to death. A conflict between the noble families and the royal family intensified even further. After my death, my father stood in front of Valentine's E with an apologetic look on his face and said, "Heaven's way isn't just, and the weak try to oppose the strong." Valentine Z had a righteous look on his face and said, "There will always be a prosperous and peaceful era." I couldn't help but find it ridiculous. People who didn't know might think that the world was in chaos and the country was in ruins. In fact, the new emperor was truly a wise ruler, and he brought about a real prosperous and peaceful era. But this had nothing to do with my stubborn and old-fashioned father, or the scheming Valentine Z. It's just a pity that I won't be able to see it in my second life. I lived so hastily and uselessly, leaving behind only a useless reputation after my death. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day when the Z family came to discuss the marriage, just like in the previous 2 lives. Mrs. Z paid a visit with a beaming smile on her face. She was so dignified and amiable that it was hard to believe how harsh she would become later. At that time, my mother said to me that although the Z family had declined, the Kui family would prepare a generous dowry for me. With the Z family being a widow and an orphan, I didn't have to worry about the affairs of the inner courtyard. Who would have thought that after I married into the Z family, Mrs. Z would change her attitude completely? She took my dowry but treated me very meanly, saying that there would be many places where Valentine Z needed to spend money to get ahead. The Z family had no servants, so even in the coldest days of winter, I had to wash their clothes until my hands were swollen and painful. I had to stand in my mother-in-law's room every day to observe the rules. If I made the slightest mistake, I would be punished to copy the lessons for women. I once cried and complained to my parents, but my father said that it was my good fortune to be able to marry Valentine Z and that I shouldn't be so delicate and willful. My mother was timid by nature, so she didn't dare to say much. Just like in the previous 2 lives, Mrs. Z paid a visit with a beaming smile on her face. She was so dignified and amiable that it was hard to believe how harsh she would become later. At that time, my mother said to me that although the Z family had declined, the Kui family would prepare a generous dowry for me. With the Z family being a widow and an orphan, I didn't have to worry about the affairs of the inner courtyard. Who would have thought that after I married into the Z family, Mrs. Z would change her attitude completely? She took my dowry but treated me very meanly, saying that there would be many places where Valentine Z needed to spend money to get ahead. The Z family had no servants, so even in the coldest days of winter, I had to wash their clothes until my hands were swollen and painful. I had to stand in my mother-in-law's room every day to observe the rules. If I made the slightest mistake, I would be punished to copy the lessons for women. I once cried and complained to my parents, but my father said that it was my good fortune to be able to marry Valentine Z and I shouldn't be so delicate and willful. My mother was timid by nature, so she didn't dare to say much. Valentine Z would only try to smooth things over and persuade me to endure it. Later, he rose steadily in his career, while I was slowly worn down in the inner courtyard of the Z family. Valentine Z stood beside Mrs. Z with a slightly impatient expression. Sure enough, he didn't want to marry me and didn't love me either. But I had been strictly educated since I was a child, and I only hoped to have a respectful relationship with my husband, never daring to dream of a loving and affectionate marriage. He treated me indifferently and would only show me a little more tenderness when I wrote stunning poems and political treatises that could make him famous. In this life, Without me and the Kui family's support, I want to see how far he can go. After the C family's visit, my father brought up the marriage matter with me. I knew that stubbornly refusing was a bad idea, so I pretended to be submissive and agreed. Then, I secretly bribed a doctor and pretended to be seriously ill. The doctor said that I had lost my vitality and might not live long. I might also have difficulty having children. I used this as an excuse to try to reject the Z family's marriage proposal. My father was indeed hesitant. However, Valentine Z came to our house again and declared that he wouldn't abandon me. Because of this, he even said that he would only take a concubine if he still had no children by the time he was 40. My father looked at him with love and admiration in his eyes. But he was still hesitant. The doubt in my heart grew stronger. Since Valentine Z had said so much, my father's hesitation couldn't be because he was worried about me. After all, he didn't care much about me in the first life. An incredible thought flashed through my mind. He thought I wasn't worthy of marrying Valentine Z. But, in any case, his hesitation was helping me. Everything I did was just to buy time, because the Imperial edict would arrive soon. The betrothal gifts sent from the palace were carried into the courtyard one by one, filling it up completely. I was a bit stunned. There hadn't been these in the previous life. The eunuch who read the Imperial edict while we finished reading it. In the courtyard fell silent. No one stepped forward to accept the edict. I glanced around and saw all kinds of expressions on people's faces. My father looked furious. My mother was worried. Nathaniel Kui was stunned. Ethan Kui was confused. And Celine Kui had a look of glee on her face. I had never noticed before that she had such deep thoughts and resentment. After living in the Kui family for so many years, in the end, she could actually watch the entire Kui family be destroyed without batting an eye. I calmly stepped forward and accepted the edict. Your servant woman thanks Her Majesty for the great favor. From this moment on, I was no longer the eldest legitimate daughter of the Kui family, but the imperial concubine Kui in the palace. I then said to the eunuch, "Could you please leave a few people to inform me of the relevant matters in the palace?" The eunuch naturally agreed. In this way, my father couldn't possibly make me commit suicide to preserve the Kui family's reputation anymore. Back in the inner hall, my father slapped me hard. How could the Kui family have given birth to such a shameless thing like you? I replied calmly, "Father, resisting the imperial edict is a capital crime." He sneered and said, "The woman is just a woman. No matter how much she reads, she's still of no use." After saying that, he vented his anger on my mother, blaming her for not knowing how to teach our children. Yes, my father had said the same thing in the previous life. I had been taught by him since I was a child, and later he could naturally recognize that the poems and articles that Valentine Z used to gain fame were all written by me. But my father, who had always cared about the integrity of scholars, surprisingly didn't look down on Valentine Z because of this. Instead, he said to me, "No matter how much a woman reads, she can't put her knowledge to use this way. It's not really a waste of your talent." When I was young, he always praised my studies and sighed countless times why I wasn't a boy. At that time, I didn't understand. In the end, my father left with a final word. If I insisted on entering the palace, he would sever our father-daughter relationship from then on. At night, my mother carefully applied medicine to the corner of my mouth. She kept saying good things about my father and was even more worried about how I would survive in the deep palace without the support of my family. Celine Kui, however, only cared about herself. "Sister, how will the other girls in our clan behave now?" She was afraid that I would affect the Kui family's reputation and the marriages of the Kui women. I glanced at her infuriately and said, "Didn't father say that I'm no longer a Kui woman?" My mother patted my head and said, "Nonsense. Your father was just angry." But I knew he wasn't just saying it out of anger. Before I left, he didn't allow anyone to see me off, showing his determination to draw a clear line with me. However, Ethan Kui secretly came unstuffed a package of Sephora flower cakes into my hand. They were made by my mother herself. In the past, when the Sephora flowers bloomed, she would take her siblings to pick them and then make Sephora flower cakes and distribute them to us. His eyes were red. Elder sister and mother said you won't be able to eat these anymore. I thought of my first life again, when the Kui family was destroyed. My father died, and Nathaniel Kui followed him and my younger brother. Valentine Z made him into a human skin drum. He beat it in front of my spirit tablet, just because Ethan Kui thought he treated me badly and that he had risen to power by sucking the blood and flesh of our Kui family. At that moment, I wished I could turn into a vengeful ghost and gnaw on the flesh of him and Celine Kui every day. In my previous life, I missed a chance to get my revenge. This time, I won't let it slip away. However, the life in the palace was beyond my expectations. The new emperor, Leonard Xiao, gave me a bridal night and drank the nuptial wine with me. He had a somewhat imposing appearance, but his words were a bit cautious. The imperial edict was issued by my mother behind my back. She heard that I was troubled by the noble families, so she came up with this idea. She didn't know about the Kui family's family instructions. I know I've wronged you. From now on, we'll be a family. The Empress and the Empress Dowager don't have much education, but they don't have any malicious intentions either. The noble families always said that he came from a humble background, that he had obtained the throne unjustly, that he was uneducated and didn't know any etiquette. Our first meeting gave me a warmth that I had never experienced in my 2 previous lives. And it was time to go to bed, he whispered in my ear. Don't be afraid. I'll treat you well. I was reminded of my bridal night with Valentine Z. I bit my lower lip and told myself, Cecilia Kui, you must live a good life in this life. The next day, I had to pay my respects to the Empress and the Empress Dowager. When I arrived at the Fengjio Palace, the Empress Dowager was actually there. The next day, I had to pay my respects to the Empress and the Empress Dowager. When I arrived at the Fengjio Palace, the Empress Dowager was actually there. The decorations in the palace were simple, and it even looked a bit casual. The Empress and the Empress Dowager were dressed in their finest clothes and sat there with unhappy expressions on their faces. They had piled on too much gold and silver, and their taste was really something to be desired. I curtsied to them, but I didn't hear them tell me to rise for a long time. The women of the noble families were taught strict rules since they were young, so I wouldn't make a fool of myself by not being able to stand it. If the Empress and the Empress Dowager were not kind to me, my life in the future wouldn't be easy either. It would seem that this life of mine wouldn't be easy either. Only when a palace serving puff did the Empress Dowager say, "Oh, rise, rise. The imperial concubine doesn't need to be so formal." She then explained, I was so taken with the imperial concubine's hairpin and headdress that I forgot to tell you to rise. The Empress quickly chimed in. The imperial concubine's curtsy is really beautiful. It's even better than what the palace ladies do. I was so fascinated that I couldn't take my eyes off it. Then she realized what she had said undated. I didn't mean to compare you with the palace ladies. It was really quite interesting. I'd barely set foot in the palace when I smelled the rot in the imperial household department. With Leonard Xiao's harem a modest affair, you'd think management would be a breeze, yet my rations were tampered with, and paperwork mysteriously vanished. I wasn't here to play games, I wanted peace, and I'd fight for it. Dragging the head steward behind me, marched straight to the Empress. At first, she slouched against her cushions, eyes glazed. But as I detailed the embezzlement, her spine straightened. You're a born manager, she declared, seizing my hands. Take over. I washed my hands of it. I bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, concubines can only assist surrendering power, risks accusations of neglecting duty. Her face fell. Father said being Empress was a lark. No wonder she floundered. Her father, a warlord who helped Leonard seize the throne, had pawned her off as political collateral. Still, I stepped in. Someone had to keep this palace afloat. One afternoon, while tutoring the Empress on ledgers, She doodled horses more than counted coins. Leonard Zhao arrived. The Empress and I share a curse. He laughed, eyeing her scribbles. Too much swordplay, too little study. The Empress nudged me. His Majesty spends more time with the Grand Tutor than on the battlefield these days. His gaze swiveled to me. Rumor says the Kui clan's wisdom rivals the Imperial Library. Might I borrow your insights? My pulse quickened in opening. During our discussions, he revealed his struggle to draw noble candidates to the imperial exams. I expected you to dismiss the aristocracy, I said. He twirled a jade seal. Soldiers win wars. Scholars build empires. Nobles hold institutional memory useful, if channeled right. I proposed William Wang, the Wang clan's wild child, youngest loose, lipped and competitive. A whisper about losing to commoners goaded him into the exams. His victory snowballed. Other nobles followed suit, except for my own stuffy clan. Returning to my chambers, I found Leonard Zhao studying my discarded political treatise. Panic spiked, but instead of anger, his eyes burned. You've been hoarding your brilliance. He traced the inked characters. We cruelers blame women for their failures. That night, we slipped into the countryside watching farmers strain under sun-beaten fields, he murmured. This is why I set the exam topic. The people outweigh the throne. The last dynasty forgot that lesson. Our bind deeping, yet the palace remained a minefield. The Empress confided her marriage was a sham. She'd loved a soldier killed in battle. And sharing a bed with Leonard felt like siblings squabbling when ministers proposed expanding the harem. He refused, citing noble backlash. You could win hearts through consort selection, I suggested innocently. He stormed out, leaving me bewildered. The Empress flicked my forehead. Cecilia, he's not collecting concubines, he's courting you. I dismissed it. I saw him as a kindred spirit, a partner in reform after all. The policies that won him acclaim in my past life, they were my words. And for Valentine Z. Valentine this time was arrogant, stripped him up despite his literary fame stolen from me. Once, he placed second in the exams. Rumors flew he avenged her broken betrothal. He assumed I'd sabotaged him, unaware I'd stacked the deck with examiners who valued substance over flourish. Even so, he charmed the Prime Minister's daughter and wriggled into the Handan Academy when Leonard Zhao asked my opinion. I lied smoothly. I know him not. But I remembered every cruelty the court sang Rosamund flaunting his affection as I wasted away. His mother sneering at my barren womb. My resolve steeled when I caught father bowing to Valentine at a temple. The truth crashed over me. Valentine, this father's secret weapon to restore the old regime. I'd been a disposable pawn. Back at the palace, Celine Kui lurked, desperate for Leonard's attention on a fateful evening. When she simpered over dinner, I summoned the Empress. Your eyes seem strained, Miss Kui, the Empress drawled. Shall I call the physician? Unless you blinded by ambition? She then regaled us with a tale of breaking a fool in Error's legs. Aline fled pale-faced, but the night was far from over. Leonard cornered me later, eyes blazing. Next time, come to me for protection. His embrace was possessive. I'm not sharing, as his investigation into Valentine deepened. He pulled me close. If it's just him and your clan, I'll keep you safe. I smiled into his chest. This time, the pawn would become the player. After uncovering the hidden secrets behind the scenes, Leonard Zhao decided to bide his time and completely wipe out the remnants of the previous dynasty. However, as the investigation delved deeper, an astonishing truth came to light. Valentine Z was not of the bloodline of the former crown prince. It turned out that the concubine in question had committed adultery with another man. I could hardly wait to see the look on my father's face when he learned the truth for the sake of this illegitimate child. He had ruined my life in the first lifetime, cost me my life in the second, and in the third lifetime he was planning to sacrifice another daughter. And Celine Kui proved to be even more resourceful than I had thought. She was pregnant according to common practice. She should have been carried into the mansion in a small sedan chair to be a concubine, but the Anna Marquise residents had to consider the face of the Kui family in the Imperial concubine, while also not breaking their promise to the general's residence. My father never expected that Celine Kui could do such a thing. Celine Kui knelt on the ground, sobbing and speaking incoherently. Daughter was wrong. Daughter really didn't know anything. My father slapped Celine Kui to the ground and then pushed her towards my mother. This is the good daughter you raised. Children are not born by women alone, and the education of children is not just the responsibility of women. Yet when something goes wrong, it seems as if men have nothing to do with it. I took them to see Leonard Xiao, and the father and son of the Anna Marquis were also there. I said calmly, young master. My sister said she knows nothing. What do you have to say? Celine Kui didn't expect me to reveal it directly and turned pale with fright. The expression of the heir of the Anna Marquis changed. There is a big difference between two people falling in love out of their own will and deceiving the imperial concubines, my sister, who is the legitimate daughter of the Kui family. He immediately took out Celine Cui's personal letter and handkerchief as evidence. My father was so angry that he could hardly stand up. I failed to educate my daughter properly. I'll leave it to the Marquis' residents to deal with. Celine Kui pounced in front of me. Sister. Sister, please save me. I looked at the Anna Marquis. What's your plan? Marquis? The Anna Marquis said that he had already negotiated with the general's residence and would marry Celine Kui as a secondary wife. But the other side required her to enter the house first. It was fair enough. Celine Kui let out a long sigh of relief. She must have thought she had won the bet, but she had no idea how much she would lose in the future. This matter couldn't be hidden. Leonard Xiao wanted to suppress it as much as possible for fear of affecting my reputation, but I said it was unnecessary once a person is dead. All the empty fame means nothing. But for Celine Kui, I want all the people in the world to know who she is and how she entered the Anna Marquis' residence. I want her to never be able to hold her head up in the upper-class circles of Dingjing. Valentine Z seemed to have gone crazy. He no longer steamed slowly as he did in the previous life. In order to obtain the throne that didn't belong to him, he contacted the rebels of the previous dynasty and colluded with the Northern Yu at the same time. This news was brought by the young man the Empress once loved. After years of separation, they were no longer the young boy and girl they used to be. He didn't die instead. He played along and went undercover in the Northern Yu. And Leonard Xiao told me. The Empress didn't know yet. He didn't dare to tell her. He was afraid that the Empress would directly take out a whip and lash him, so I had to go and tell her instead. The Empress was stunned for a moment, and then her eyes instantly turned red. It's really great that he didn't die. She didn't care about anything else. The Empress laughed and cried at the same time and insisted on keeping me for the night, saying that she wanted to chat with me. I stopped her and said it was too late today, and I would tell Leonard Xiao myself tomorrow. The Empress smiled cunningly, but the next day, before I could say anything, Leonard Xiao said that he would lead the army in person. I swallowed the words I wanted to say and frowned. Leonard Xiao comforted me. My father and I have been preparing for this for years this time. We will surely defeat the Northern Yu. As for the capital, I'm just letting them play their tricks. Until Leonard Xiao left for the front line. I didn't tell him that I was pregnant during the days I had been in the palace. He had always stood behind me. I couldn't hold him back. I wanted him to have no worries after Leonard Xiao left. The capital was on the verge of a storm. I summoned my father to the palace on the pretext of an order from the Empress Dowager. When he saw me, he frowned and started scolding. Why are you here, Your Majesty? This is not in line with the rules. I curled the corners of my mouth. It's more in line with the rules than a traitor plotting rebellion. His face turned pale with shock. How do you mean? I asked again. In your eyes, father, is bloodline so important? The bloodline of the previous dynasty is and a daughter can be sacrificed at will if she can't continue the bloodline. His face darkened. How dare you? I waved my hand and had the old servants of the former Eastern Palace and the servants of the Z family brought in untold him in detail about Valentine Z's background. His face turned greener and paler until he lost his strength and slumped to the ground. He shook his head and murmured, "It's impossible, this can't be true," I said coldly, leaving aside the fact that he is not of the bloodline of the previous dynasty at all. Just because he colluded with the Northern Yu, how can he be fit to be an emperor? My father widened his eyes. What collusion with the Northern Yu? I looked at him with mockery. I didn't waste any more words. Hand over the list of rebels, and the innocent people of the Kui family can still be saved. He raised his head. The Kui family will never attach themselves to the rebels. I sneered coldly. Then from now on, Nathaniel Kui will be the head of the Kui family. I placed my father under house arrest. I didn't really expect to get anything from him. Leonard Xiao's spies had already investigated most of the things. I just gave him one last chance for the kindness of my upbringing. Half a month after Leonard Xiao left, he probably had already engaged with the Northern Yu. Valentine Z lead the rebels. To rise up, they advanced smoothly all the way and attacked the capital. The Empress Dowager, the Empress, and I confronted him in the main hall. Valentine Z stood behind a group of former ministers, looking complacent. The main hall has been surrounded by me. I am the orphan of the former crown prince today. I will set things right. He looked at me again. Cecilia Kui, you should have been the Empress. Do you regret it? The Empress whispered to me. Didn't you say you didn't want to be the Empress? Whether I want to be the Empress or not is another matter. But she is really not suitable for the position. The Empress Dowager clapped her hands. Suddenly, the commander of the Imperial Guards turned his sword towards Valentine Z in an instant. The Imperial Guards surrounded them. Valentine Z was furious. "Chen Wen," Commander Chen said, "12 of my brothers and I were there except for me. All of them died to protect the family members of the former crown prince. I have repaid my debt of gratitude. My life was saved by His Majesty on the battlefield." Valentine Z suddenly burst into laughter. "Good. Very good. The Empress Dowager, the Empress, and the Imperial concubine will be buried with me, even if I lose. Leonard Xiao won't win either." When we heard this, our faces changed, but the wet nurse beside the Empress suddenly knelt down. "Your Majesty the Empress, this servant is guilty." The servant was a spy of the previous dynasty. "But this servant watched Your Majesty grow up. Your Majesty never treated this servant as a servant. How could this servant have the heart to poison you?" As she spoke, her body went limp, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. "It's difficult to be both loyal and righteous. This servant will take this poison myself," the Empress shouted. "Nanny!" She looked at Valentine Z with hatred, grabbed the sword of the guard beside her, and threw it at Valentine Z. Before Valentine Z could react, he let out a scream and fell to the ground. The sword hit his thigh directly, and blood gushed out immediately. I said loudly, "Valentine Z, your biological mother committed adultery with another man. The old servants of the Eastern Palace and the servants of the Z family can all testify to this." There was panic and embarrassment in Valentine Z's eyes, but no surprise. He actually knew. So, in the previous life, he didn't just use the Kui family as a stepping stone. He knew that the Kui family's support for him was entirely because of his background. There is no such thing as a secret that won't be revealed. Once my father knew the truth, he would surely turn against Valentine Z. Valentine Z endured the pain and tried to stand up. But before he could straighten up, an arrow pierced his heart. It was Leonard Xiao. He descended from the sky wearing armor. When my father learned of Valentine Z's defeat, he committed suicide. He said he had been blind. What he regretted from beginning to end was that Valentine Z was not of the bloodline of the former crown prince, and he had followed the wrong person. So I told Nathaniel Kui what his respected father had actually done. His Majesty was merciful and didn't implicate the innocent people of the Kui family, but his father didn't deserve to be buried in the Kui family's ancestral temple. Nathaniel Kui showed a look of pity on his face. I smiled. He colluded with Valentine Z. Did he ever think of me, or the whole family? Did he ever feel any pity? Were we supposed to be sacrificed for his so-called great righteousness? Nathaniel Quay didn't say anything more. Celine Quay had sent in her visiting card many times wanting to see me, and I had always suppressed it before. Now that everything had settled down, she was the last unfinished business on my mind. There were injuries on her face as soon as she came. She tried to pounce on me but was pushed away by the palace servants. Our imperial concubine is pregnant, be careful. Madame Mayor of the Marquis. A flash of jealousy and hatred crossed Celine Cuy's face. She lowered her head. Sister is really fortunate your sister is so miserable. I gently blew away the tea foam. Is that so? Celine Quay gritted her teeth. That air of the Annan Marquis. I interrupted her. Sister, this is the path you chose. You have to walk it even if you have to crawl. The Emperor. I know, Sister, didn't I arrange it as soon as possible? He curled the corners of my mouth. So what? I'll tell His Majesty about your vicious heart. I smiled slightly. His Majesty said it was too lenient of me to still let you have the title of Madame Mayor of the Marquis. Celine Quay was completely stunned. Why? I'm your own sister. Yes, in the previous life, I was her own sister. I said meaningfully. Perhaps it's because you owed me in the previous life. The Empress got back her former lovers. He couldn't wait to cheat. Even for a moment, Leonard Zhao arranged for her to fake her death and leave the palace. That man was appointed as the commander of the northern frontier, and the Empress would go with him under a different identity. Before leaving, at the thought of never having to be tortured by palace affairs again, he was so excited that she couldn't sleep. She even took my hand in front of Leonard Zhao and said, "The palace is really boring, and being an empress is boring too. If you get tired of it someday, bring my godson and godraider to the northern frontier to find me." Leonard Zhao forced a smile. That day will never come. The Empress spouted and left happily. The country couldn't be without an empress. Leonard Zhao made me the empress as a matter of course since I was pregnant. Everything had to be done quickly. Leonard Zhao let me enter the palace through the central gate. That was a privilege only for the first empress. Since we had won the war against the Northern Yu and eliminated the rebels of the previous dynasty, the ministers respected and feared Leonard Zhao. Even more therefore, no one dared to raise any objections. Leonard Zhao and I received the worship of all the officials together. Leonard Zhao's eyes were shining brightly. My dear Empress, I will share the mountains and rivers of the world with you. My mother liked the previous Empress very much, but she always said that the Empress was too rash and wanted to marry me, a dignified woman from a noble family. I thought of someone, the eldest legitimate daughter of the Quay family, Cecilia Quay. I passed by Keen He and saw her once. She dressed up as a man and attended a poetry gathering. I heard her complaining in the back alley that the world was too unfair to women. It was just a fleeting glance. I didn't take it too hard at that time. But now that I thought of it again, I unconsciously murmured her name. My mother took the initiative to decree that she be made an imperial concubine. I sent people to chase after the imperial edict, but I received the news of her suicide. Only then did I know that a woman of the Quay family would not be a concubine. I shouldn't have coveted her, humiliated her. I felt deeply guilty about it and took good care of the Quay family. But I raised a wolf and said her father wanted to support Vol and Team Z to seize the throne. And when I dealt with the Quay family, I found out that it was her father who had killed her. I couldn't sleep day and night. I searched for many things related to her, and years after her death, I fell in love with her by some miracle. I was actually reborn. This time, along with the Empress Dowager's decree, my betrothal gifts were also sent. I will give her everything she deserves. She is really a wonderful girl. She helped me in the Empress, but she didn't love me. She just wanted to make a deal with me. She saved me, and I thought I would lose her again. I almost revealed the truth. I think we have a lot of time in this life. She gave birth to the Crown Prince, and I made her the Holy Empress and let her attend court with me naturally. The ministers argued until they were red in the face and neck that I had made a lot of preparations in advance. I always remember the sad look on her face in the previous life. She had talent and ambition and shouldn't be confined to the harem. Only an incompetent emperor would be afraid of women and be wary of the empress's relatives. After a long time, I finally told her nervously that I had been reborn in the previous life. I had indirectly caused her death. She was stunned for a long time until tears suddenly fell from her eyes. She said that was her second life, and when she talked about her first life so calmly, I couldn't help but have red eyes. She gently hugged me. It's so nice. It turns out that there is someone who loves me in a place I didn't know.